Hello and welcome. My name is Adam Riancho, and you're watching the Monday Blunt recap of Week 12 fantasy football. Um, Before we get into it, I just want to mention my fantasy teams. This is kind of why I'm doing it, given the fact that I enjoy fantasy. So I'm going to talk about my own stuff. First, I'll start off with the DFS lineups that I mentioned in 4th and 20 on Friday. We had Mahomes, Chubb, Fournette, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Cole Beasley, Jordan Reed, Nelson Aguilar, and the Saints defense in our lineup. And together they put up 153.68 fantasy points. So obviously that was on the back of Tyreek and Mahomes, but that's why we play all those other guys, those Beasley's, Aguilar's, and Reed's, because they're cheap options and they allow you to play that stack. So obviously they didn't really pan out in terms of massive weeks. It could have been much better, but Tyreek was the number one player on the week. Mahomes was number two, so that's a great start. And if you played it in the tournaments I played, you would have made some money. So I also started a couple other ones. One put up 155 points, and the other one only 130. But all of them ended up winning, so felt good. My redraft league, an auction league, I squeaked by with a win as well. I had Tom Brady, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones, Terry McLaurin, Michael Pittman, Darren Waller, Wayne Gallman, the Dolphins defense, and Young Hui Koo as my starters, and I just barely beat Deshaun Watson, Derrick Henry, Duke Johnson, Stephon Diggs. I'm trying to think of his Noah Fant was the tight end. Brandon McManus the kicker. So I kind of lucked out with the Denver situation. The second wide receiver was Corey Davis. That's who it was. Corey Davis. And the decision that kind of ended up swaying it in my favor, he chose Nyheim Hines instead of Austin Eckler. But it seemed like he was going for Raheem Mostert for a while, so he did get more points, but he took Austin Eckler out of his lineup at the very last bit there and went with Hines, and it wasn't enough. So he was starting, let's see, the defense, Vikings defense, and kicker doesn't matter. We won, and we secured a playoff spot. So I guess I should stop saying we. I did, but if you're watching this video, then you're part of my fantasy football life, and I thank you. I'm very grateful for you. And with that being said, let's get into the nice and blunt recap. This Monday blunt, as we're gonna call it. Monday night is when we're filming this. This is November 30th, 2020. During the Monday Night Football game that's going on right now. It's in the fourth quarter, about to start, I think. I muted it, so I'm not paying attention to it right now. It's not really a game that I care too much about. I'll be honest with you. I don't really like the Seahawks. I'm not a huge fan, and I have no care for the Eagles. So let's talk about the marquee performance. We just mentioned it in our DFS recap. Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes. This wasn't a surprise at all. It was the most hyped game of the week. There was a lot of talk about Brady going into this matchup, whether or not he can compete with Mahomes in possibly their last matchup, if not a Super Bowl preview. And all we knew was Mahomes was not going to disappoint. That's why he was my number one quarterback this week. That's why Tyreek Hill, I had him at 2, only because you got to respect Davante Adams. But I had to take him out of number 1 before I set my official rankings. I wanted him number 1. I went with him in DFS, and it worked out. But the reason why, I think it was pretty obvious, the Bucks defense, it was just too soft. Their zone isn't going to do anything. No, neither is their one-on-one man coverage. We saw Cooper Kupp have 100 yards in the first game the previous Monday night, and Cheetah had 200 yards and 2 touchdowns just in the first quarter. So if you had him, you obviously won, and this was the stack that was recommended on that 4th and 20 episode on Friday. Not to toot my own horn, just trying to promote the episode. So check out nice and 4th and 20. Those come out on Fridays, and we talk swing for the fences plays and DFS starts it decisions. Moving on, we had Derrick Henry, who had more than 170 yards and 3 touchdowns. He won the game before the fourth quarter, so he could have had an enormous game, an even bigger one, but if the Colts offense could have kept it competitive, but obviously they benched him to keep him fresh for next week. Deshaun Watson on Thanksgiving had an amazing fantasy performance. He is always good in a primetime game. And Will Fuller, extremely reliable wide receiver, who has nearly as high a ceiling as Tyreek Hill, but we just found out he obviously didn't have a inconspicuous performance, and I bet they drug tested him right after, and he just failed for performance enhancing drugs, so he's got a 6-game suspension. Yikes, that's tough because he's in a contract year. He's struggled with injuries. Obviously, he was motivated to get back and wanted to get his next contract, but he got caught putting the wrong things in his body. So he'll be out for pretty much the rest of the season because I don't think they're making the playoffs. So that puts Brandin Cooks in the top 15, maybe top 12. We'll see what happens next week, but for sure a big uptick for Brandin Cooks and a slight downtick for Watson. Let's be honest. Nobody else is the reliable deep threat and clear wide receiver one that Will Fuller is. So I can't imagine Watson has as high a ceiling as he does when Will Fuller is on the field with him. So all in all, it doesn't move the needle that much, but I would have Justin Herbert over Deshaun Watson going forward, whereas before that probably wasn't the case. Antonio Gibson takes over for the Washington football team when they're in the goal-to-go situations and now has 11 touchdowns in 11 games this season. So very reliable. I can't imagine he's going to slow down. Nick Chubb looking like a top 5 running back option at the moment. His efficiency is something you can count on every game. Same goes for James Robinson's workload. He gets every look out of the backfield, and without a consistent starting quarterback, then his usage will only go up if it changes. So trust James Robinson despite the kind of lackluster fantasy schedule coming up for the playoffs, fantasy playoff schedule. Latavius Murray and David Montgomery each had big plays and scored a touchdown. I think each of their value goes up as the threat of a mobile quarterback is added to their backfields. But otherwise, it's without Trubisky and Taysom Hill, they're not as great options. But I think both of them are a little bit more exciting given the mobile quarterback pair. Austin Eckler, he's back. If you kept him through his recovery or traded him at some point, he's an automatic start and a clear top 10 guy alongside Herbert when he inevitably scores some touchdowns because he didn't have any this week. He has top 3 upside. So, that can easily happen next week. I have a feeling Austin Eckler is going to be in the top 5 rankings this Wednesday. Kenyon Drake, he got a lot of work, and this might be a good sign for what to expect going forward if Kyler Murray is wary of taking more hits as he carries a sore shoulder. This keeps him in the running back 2 mix, but he remains touchdown dependent with only 2 games this year exceeding 100 yards from scrimmage. So don't get too high on Kenyon Drake, but this is a good sign. Wayne Gallman looks to have established himself among the top 12 now that he's clearly established a 3-down role that only gets stronger near the goal line. He's had 6 touchdowns in the last 5 games, and that doesn't look to slow down anytime soon. With Daniel Jones dealing with a hamstring injury, he can expect a 20-touch floor weekly. And right now they've got the 1 seed in their division. So they're technically competing for a playoff spot, and they've got something to keep motivating them, not to just kind of, tank for the next draft pick. But I like Wayne Gallman a lot. He could easily be in the top 10, if not at least the top 15. He got 27 touches. That's insane. So moving on, we'll talk about Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams, the Green Bay running back duo. In my mind, they're the second best running back duo in the league, behind only the Cleveland Browns running back pair. As much as Jones is still cemented in the top 10, don't get me wrong, I still think he's a obvious running back one option, but I don't think he remains a locked in top 3 option as he has been all season basically. I have him on my team, and I've been a little bit worried since that injury because the Green Bay coaching staff is a little bit wary and cautious when it comes to injuries. So he only had a snap advantage of 38-33 over Jamal Williams. So that's not a massive share of the volume. It's clearly both of them getting work. A 54-46 split is what it is. So maybe things will turn a little bit more in Jones' favor as the weather gets colder and they run the ball as the season winds down. He had a 300-yard games to close out last season. So fingers crossed that comes back. But when they split the work like this, it's a little bit concerning to see Jones come off the field and stay off the field for full drives at a time sometimes. Williams is definitely in the flex conversation at least. I would put him in the running back 20 to 27 range. It'll change on the matchup, but hovering around running back 25 feels about right. He and Latavius Murray are the most valuable handcuff running backs in fantasy for sure. Ronald Jones flashed some talent on his touchdown reception, but it remains difficult to trust his workload. His wrist doesn't go away. DeAndre Swift looks to be returning next week and will be a top 15 back the rest of the season. Can't wait for that. Ito Smith, he was the better running back by far. When just on the eye test, you know what I mean? When you watch the game, it was clear Ito Smith had a bit more juice, seeing nearly the same workload as Brian Hill, but more so in the second half. So, they changed their approach, went more with the hot hand. We'll see if that continues, or even if Todd Gurley continues to miss time. But if he does, then I'd prefer Smith over Hill as a bench ad. But he faces New Orleans, the Chargers, Tampa Bay, and Kansas City from now through Week 16. So I would stay away from either of them in Weeks 13 and 15. Excuse me. Dalvin Cook got injured, but then returned to the game, so he's not expected to miss time apparently. But given his injury history in the past, it's possible to limit his workload a little bit to lower the risk of aggravating anything. He remains an elite option as long as he remains healthy. Kareem Hunt saw his fewest touches this season and had no receptions for only the second time all year. So Hunt seems to get more work in the first half now that Chubb has come back. Before it was kind of the other way around. And he Stefanski seems to want to keep Nick Chubb fresh for the fourth quarter. So he's the one that closes out the games. He's the better runner, in my opinion. I consider him more of a mid-tier running back 2 going forward. That's Kareem Hunt, rather than a clear top 12 option. So a little bit closer to where you drafted him, not necessarily the top 5 option people said he was when Chubb was out of the lineup. Raheem Mostert had a solid first game back in a difficult division matchup. This game was more likely a floor game than not. If he stays on the field, then he'll be inside my top 15 easily for the rest of the season. This offense is great, especially for running backs and even the receivers. So let's hope he stays healthy, stays on the field. Alvin Kamara's value has taken a sharp downtick with Taysom Hill. It's very obvious. While his game was a bit fluky against Denver, only 1 reception for -2 yards in the last 2 games is very scary. And that's a fact. Those are his receiving stats the last 2 games. -2 yards, only on 1 reception. He used to be guaranteed 5 receptions a game. So that's a little bit, that's pretty concerning. Not what you've come to expect from Kamara at all. So you can only hope for Brees to get healthy quickly, because if not, then he could be a big reason why you don't advance in the playoffs. He definitely got you there. If you have Kamara, it's hard to imagine you're not in the playoffs. But you you got to be a little worried come week 14 when it's do or die. Damian Harris, he was disappointing, so serves me right for thinking I could trust a New England running back. I won't be ranking him nearly as high in future games. This backfield has too many mouths to feed to be consistently reliable, and I have learned my lesson, even though I have learned it many times in the past. Nyheim Hines, he was the game script beneficiary as the Colts lost this game early and were forced to abandon the run. Jonathan Taylor looks to reclaim his lead back role when he comes back, but Hines maintains flex appeal, especially in PPR leagues. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's just completely matchup dependent in my mind, and I'm glad I didn't start him on my team this week. I started him the week before, it worked out, but he doesn't have a particularly good schedule to finish the year. He has a decent matchup this week against Denver, but then New Orleans and some more tough teams vis-a-vis the run. So he's an extremely volatile player that can disappear from the field at any point, whether it's the first quarter, the fourth quarter, before the 2-minute drill. Anytime. Le'Veon was on the field more in this game, and ever since he's joined this team, he's cratered CEH's floor. So it's a bit sad. The Raiders, though, were just pathetic against the Falcons. Talk about sad. Jacobs is still a starter in your lineup, obviously, assuming his ankle injury doesn't linger. But I feel like they're just going to throw this game away. They got a little maybe down on themselves after losing to the Chiefs, but putting up a good fight. They maybe got complacent. And the Falcons, they're motivated now that there's no Dan Quinn in the mix. So their defense has been better. The defense was the best this week. I'm sure you didn't start them, but maybe something to keep an eye on going forward. Maybe this isn't the cake matchup that it has supposedly been all season long, or maybe they just felt embarrassed by Taysom Hill and they really wanted to prove themselves. Ezekiel Elliott, boy, what a poor performance. I feel like this is just a confirmation that you need to panic. If last week somehow fooled you into thinking you were safe, only 3.2 yards per carry and was benched for Pollard after fumbling yet again. So, not looking good for Zeke, and I feel like they're going to kind of just move on to next year mentally pretty soon. If you want to bench him at Baltimore next week, I wouldn't doubt your logic. The question is, who are you benching him for? Hopefully, you have some good depth at running back. Maybe Wayne Gallman is someone you picked up. Moving on to receivers, we covered Hill and Fuller. So we'll mention Jarvis Landry. He's finally not had to deal with terrible weather since the bye, and has shown that his 11 targets. Excuse me, I just had some dinner, some Thai food, burping up those noodles. So those 11 targets in week 8 were no fluke. He got 11 again this week. Had a great stat line. He's got the best hands on the team, so it's no wonder Baker looks his way often. 3 of his next 4 games on the road, so the weather shouldn't be a factor. A couple of them in domes as well. So that's something to look forward to. However, he does have Marlon Humphrey and James Bradbury in weeks 14 and 15. So that might be a reason to keep him on your bench. Amari Cooper is very touchdown dependent, but for wide receiver production, or wide receiver 1 production. But he's got a decent floor even with Dalton under center. So that's the only guy there that I somewhat trust in Dallas. And then Debo and A.J. Brown are kind of in the same tier for me. Both are very athletic, great after the catch. Debo has a higher floor. In Shanahan's system, he gets a little more targets, but we'll see if those change with Ayuk coming back. And who knows, it's possible George Kittle could come back too. But they both have great high ceilings and can score a touchdown from anywhere on the field basically at any point in the game. So they're good plays, and if you happen to see Debo on your waiver wire, because he's on the waiver wire in my league, unfortunately. I didn't snag him. He got dropped when he was on IR. But I'm going to be putting in a bid for him for sure. I suggest you do too. If Fitzpatrick is starting, then Devontae Parker, has top 10 upside. I think that's pretty much established at this point. But there aren't going to be that many more Fitzpatrick starts in Miami. We'll see about that. So it helped that he's facing the Jets, obviously, but with Tua back under center, you can't really trust this type of production for him. It's great to see Allen Robinson back, though, near the top of the scoring leaders list. Trubisky needs all the help he can get to move the ball. He's obviously fighting for his contract in the future as an eventual backup, if that. And Robinson is clearly his best option. So his schedule looks rather good the rest of the way. If he keeps scoring, he'll be a very valuable piece for the playoffs. He gets his targets. The question is, are they catchable targets? This week they were, and he had 2 touchdowns, but he should have had 3. And let's hope Allen Robinson stays top 10, because he's on my team, and boy, I would really love it, because he's been very disappointing. Justin Jefferson, on the other hand, not a disappointment at all. He was the first look in the end zone with Thielen out, but I wouldn't expect that to continue when Adam Thielen gets back. Adam Thielen leads, at least he was the leader in touchdowns. I don't know if Devontae Adams passed him on Sunday night, but they're both lock it in wide receiver 2s. Godwin and Evans benefited from garbage time as the Bucs fought from behind, but they will get targets in every game regardless. So basically, as expected game for them. They were both ranked right next to each other in my pre-week 12 rankings on Wednesday, and they basically, obviously, Evans has the touchdown upside, but otherwise they're kind of the same, not 9 targets apiece. Terry produces no matter what the circumstances are. If you have Terry McLaurin, you're starting him. If only Alex Smith could throw passes in the red zone instead of handing to Antonio Gibson every time. But, we take the yardage floor, and we're grateful for it. He gets a lot of yak, and eventually he's going to, get one of those long touchdowns. But it seems to work for them the way that they're doing it, so it's hard to imagine they change very much. DJ may have hurt himself landing awkwardly. DJ Moore, that is. So Robbie Anderson would be a reliable wide receiver 2 if he misses any time. Otherwise, they're all flex plays for me. It's hard for me to trust one particular receiver each week unless the matchup clearly says that one of them has an easier time against a given corner. Devontae Adams had a slightly down game for his standards, but still scores the touchdown. They were up big early, so they didn't really need him to compete in the second half. Robert Woods had a very reliable game, but Cooper Kupp came way down to earth. Richard Sherman adds a dynamic presence to the San Francisco secondary, and this rivalry is pretty tense. The 49ers know the Rams' weaknesses, so they were able to keep Cooper in check. We're coming up on 23 minutes, so I'll go a little bit faster. We're trying to touch on every relevant player. We'll go, Calvin Ridley. He should have even bigger games if Julio misses more time. He dominates the target share when that's the case, assuming their defense doesn't win the game for them in the first half like it did this week. But he still had a touchdown, and he got the targets. I see him a lot like this next guy, Keenan Allen. They won't catch 16 passes every week, but that doesn't mean that they can't. Keenan remains a top 5 option no matter what. Ridley's in the top 10 for sure, especially if Julio's out. Surprisingly, it was T. Higgins who was more usable this week, not Tyler Boyd. And that being said, without the touchdown, his stat line is nothing to be envied at all. These guys might be droppable, both of them, depending on who you can pick up off the wire. I am not excited about either of them. With Brandon Allen, Ryan Finley, whoever the fuck. If it's not Joe Burrow, then no thank you. DeAndre Hopkins had a down game, but that was expected. He was playing playing New England. That's what Bill Belichick does. He double teams the best player. But given that type of scheme, 5 for 55 ain't that bad, knowing how poor Kyler Murray's stat line turned out to be. Michael Thomas, on the other hand, did not return to the dominant target hog we were hoping for. Hard to see it happening again this year. Sad to see. As I'm writing this, this is about the Will Fuller news. I told you about that. Brandon Cooks, top 12 option the rest of the way. Nelson Aguilar had 6 targets again. That's seems to be the number for him. He's Carr's best option in the receiving game, who's not named Darren Waller, obviously. He takes the deep shots. Some of them work, some of them don't. But a decent day, almost 8 half PPR points. Not gonna kill you. Beasley, another guy we recommended, did not have the double-digit targets we expected. That was a bit of a surprise, but he did throw a touchdown pass, so he did save you there. Stephon Diggs, though, was shut down, catching 7 catches for only 39 yards against the Chargers. So this secondary came to play, and this offense, the Bills' offense, takes a bit of a downturn when John Brown is not in the lineup. At least Josh Allen definitely doesn't have the upside if John Brown's not in the game. And I'll just be honest here, I was wrong about Michael Pittman and Christian Kirk this week, especially Michael Pittman. I'm not giving up on Pittman, but I find it very difficult to hold on to Christian Kirk any longer, and I'm obviously much more hesitant to start Pittman. If Murray's down game relates to his shoulder more so than it does the Patriots' defense, then the deep shots to Kirk won't really be there, or at least not as often and not as accurately. I think Kirk is someone you consider dropping if you have the right option on the waiver wire there, or if you need space for maybe a backup defense, someone with a good matchup you want to play in the playoffs. Evan Ingram, moving on to tight ends. He had a great matchup and had a lot of yards, but also lost a fumble, and this was probably his best game of the entire season. I don't think he'll top it again. So if you started him, good on you, but I don't really trust Evan Ingram. So I'm not really looking into this very much. Gronk, he had a few really big plays and a top 5 play at tight end each week. I honestly consider him almost the same as Mark Andrews. He may not get as many red zone looks as Mark Andrews does. The touchdown upside is a bit higher with Andrews, but I feel like the floor with Gronk is a little bit higher and a little bit more reliable. I feel like there's a big 4 at tight end, and Gronk is in it. Kelsey, obviously, Kelsey's like a trump card. He's the Travis card. He almost threw a touchdown pass to Mahomes, so they're trying to get him involved, trying to make a few things happen, keep him entertained until they get to the playoffs. He'll always be involved. Hawkinson, I think, has finally arrived as a top 5 guy at the tight end position. He's my tight end 5 rest of season, and now that they fired Patricia, the play calling should be a little bit better. I think there should be a bit more energy in the locker room, and this bodes well amazingly for TJ Hawkinson next season. I think he's going to remain in the top 5, maybe top 4, now that Gronk is another year older. I like him a lot going forward, and especially for next year, so keep an eye on him, and remember him when drafts come around next year. Hunter Henry is also very reliable. I feel like he slots in at tight end 6 very easily. His upside is a little capped because there's a lot of options on that team, but he has a good floor, and not many tight ends are as solidly consistent as he is. Waller came back down to earth. It seems that defenses get really worried about him in weeks after a big game, so it's unfortunate to see that he can disappear from time to time, but if you owned him, you already knew that was a thing that happens to him. Just ask Belichick in week 3. I'm not bitter about it. It's okay. Other than that, there aren't any other notable tight end performances that aren't just random in my mind, so I'm not really going to spend much time talking about any other ones. But I did recommend Jordan Reed. I took a swing on him, so I will talk about that. I was wrong. He did not pan out. But my logic was right. I mentioned he had 5.5 targets in the last 4 games that Kittle wasn't in playing. This game he had 6. Yet again, he only caught 2 of them. So he is getting his chances. And only 8 tight ends had more than 6 targets this week. So it wasn't a terrible pick in terms of outside the top 12 dart throw tight ends to play. But it didn't work out. That's the nature of tight ends. What can you do? So lastly, before I go, we'll touch on quarterbacks. Tom Brady performed his best Jameis Winston impression. Good job, Tom. 2 interceptions. Lovely. You avoided the pick 6, so it wasn't a perfect impression. But Arians is your acting coach, so good job. Good performance. We would prefer the GOAT impression when you come back from bye. I lost Joe Burrow, so you're my starter in the playoffs, and I need you, man. Let's go. Moving on. Personal moment for me. Kirk Cousins and Kyler Murray decided to trade spots in the rankings, oddly enough. Hard to imagine Kirk can be a top 10 option again. That is Kirk Cousins, not Christian Kirk, obviously. But he's a bit more interesting if Dalvin Cook has to miss any time. He threw 3 touchdowns this week. He's had a lot of multiple touchdown games, just not too many 300-yard performances. His target tree is just so narrow with Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and the occasional Rudolph, the occasional Irv Smith. Dalvin isn't catching as many passes this season as he used to be. So I don't trust Kirk Cousins. Aaron Rodgers looked great against Chicago, but he basically won the game in the second quarter. So the third quarter didn't force him to rack up those stats, and he was reasonable. I had him, I want to say at 13, but he ended up in the low top 10. So he outperformed my estimations. Justin Herbert, big old Herb, put up a nice floor game trying to come back in Buffalo, while Josh Allen had another slightly down game without John Brown. As we mentioned, Beasley probably won't steal his passes consistently, but he's better when John Brown is in the lineup. Josh Allen, of course. Herbert's a thing of beauty, even without the hair. But I just trust Justin Herbert. This offense is amazing, and I wouldn't be surprised if Anthony Lynn gets fired in the next week or two. The writing's on the wall. This roster is too good to be losing all of these games. They're competitive in all of them, but everyone knows they don't really have a shot. And it comes down to play calling and coaching, and just they need some new energy that can change, the mood in the locker room. Give us some optimism. I hope they don't just fight for the lowest pick they can get. Him and Eckler should be lights out rest of season. Him and Eckler are going to be a great combo. So I love the Chargers. I'm a Chargers fan, and I'm excited for Herbert's future. But this is not our year, obviously. Let's see. Baker Mayfield and Mike Glennon both had a good back and forth game here. Baker looks more comfortable when he doesn't have to force the ball to Beckham, which is good for him, but I still don't really feel good starting either of them. Obviously, Glennon isn't a name you're really considering. Philip Rivers nearly had 300 yards passing yet again. A bit of a surprise that he continues to do that. Ryan Fitzpatrick keeps slinging it as long as he gets the opportunity, but the opportunity is not really his reliably. So if Tua gets ruled out, then he's a good streaming play, good DFS play. He's going to be cheap whenever he's there. But, if he's the only quarterback you have, that's suicide. Trubisky offers a sneaky floor because of his rushing ability. Keep that in mind, but don't expect higher than like a top 12 performance consistently. Daniel Jones tweaked his hamstring, so if he plays, he might not leave the pocket as much going forward. That bodes well for Wayne Gallman, especially if Colt McCoy is, just backing him up and taking his place. So I like this. I like this Giants offense a little bit down the season here. They are in first place in their division, so they're paying attention. They're not getting complacent. They're improving each week. I think their coaching hire is boding well for them. It was definitely tough in the beginning of the season. New coaching staff, young team, no training camp. But as the season goes on, they're kind of like a bit like the Miami of last year. Tough start in the beginning, but they're establishing a culture, and I think they have a shot at being a pretty good team next year. At least they're always going to be in the playoff mix given their division. So there is that. Matthew Stafford may have a boost of energy with a new coach. He should get Galladay back soon, at least hopefully. And they should probably both have a good finish to the season. Tannehill gets a big stat bump because he throws the ball to A.J. Brown, all those yards after the catch. He's still a shaky start, though. I'm not trusting him too much. If he had finished the game like a real game, then obviously it was a real game on Sunday, but the fourth quarter just didn't really matter for them, so didn't add to his stat line in the fourth. Taysom Hill, boy, he fell back to earth. So he doesn't have tight end eligibility, obviously. That's a bit of a damper on his story, but they didn't really need him to throw the ball very much. They got up and won this game easily. So he plays Atlanta again, so he should be better. But it's hard to judge exactly where Taysom Hill should be ranked. He's probably going to make the top 15, but I don't think I'm going to put him higher than 10 this week. I had him at 9 or 8 last week. Same goes for Cam Newton. This New England offense is just... It's just so rough. It's hard to watch. He gets you those rushes, but if he doesn't score, then it's not going to be worth it. So, looks like I overestimated the floor these guys would provide this week, and I'll adjust moving forward. And lastly, I'll talk about it because I put him at 10 in my quarterback rankings. Derek Carr, both Taysom Hill and Cam Newton outperformed him. Pretty much everyone outperformed him. Derek Carr was just a massive letdown. He just shit the bed, basically. He had 3 fumbles, was benched before the game was over. He was kind of overdue for a bad game, He'd been performing well enough for people to take notice, and it's not a surprise he let us down. So this doesn't come as a huge shock. But there we have it. We've got Week 12 pretty much in the books. We'll see if the Steelers and the Ravens game actually happens. It's on Wednesday now, supposedly. I don't know. But I'll mention the Seahawks-Eagles game right now. From what I saw, you're starting Russell Wilson, you're starting DK Metcalf, you're taking a shot on Tyler Lockett. He's going to pan out for you more often than not. Wentz is not looking great. That offensive line is just not helpful. Alshon Jeffrey making an appearance, but obviously that craters the value for everyone else. And Miles Sanders isn't